Last time on Marvel Rivals we made a small wish list of characters I'd like to see and how I'd like them to work. Many of you had awesome ideas and apparently you guys like my ideas too. So, since I have even less self-respect than an OnlyFans model in Dubai, we're going for the re-up. Before I get to that though, just a note, I am primarily considering characters who would be unique, fun, and change the game overall. There are plenty of characters who would be cool to see that either aren't unique enough to really solidify a spot for me, or everybody else has already mentioned, like Gamora, Drax, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage. I love all those characters, but they just don't bring anything new to the roster, and there's nothing in their power set that feels all that different to existing characters. With that being said, I'll start off with somebody I haven't seen suggested yet, who I think is a very unique choice. Domino. I love Domino, for a few reasons, and I think her lucky streak has infinite possibilities to make her an incredible addition to Rivals. She could suit Duelist, but I think she's a better fit for Strategist, and I'll get to why. For her equipment, I think she should just have two modes like Cloak and Dagger, a black form and a white form. One's lucky for your team, the other's unlucky for the enemy. For black form, just some standard firearms like her dual SMGs. For her passive, I'm thinking either every reload has a 50% chance to quick reload, or every round has a small chance to crit regardless of where it hits. For her first cooldown, I think being able to make enemies' weapons malfunction for a short period of time would be hilarious. Hawkeye's bowstring snaps, Thor becomes unworthy for a few seconds, Spider-Man's web shooters run out of fluid, Jeff gets a furball. There's so many cool and unique animations that they could add to the game to give her more presence while also keeping her viable. If she's in white form, her primary fire would be the same, but it heals allies instead. As for the cooldown, the exact opposite of a malfunction. One of your allies gets the lucky buff for a few seconds, allowing them to live on 1 HP from lethal damage. For her second cooldown, just a regular escape ability that lets her run faster, but also makes it so any projectiles that hit her have a 50% chance to miss. Now, her ultimate. Here's the real fun part. I'd love for it to be a chance effect where you roll the dice. If you roll a 1, the ult does nothing. If you roll a 2, you heal your allies for a small amount. If you roll a 3, you damage the enemy for a small amount. If you roll a 4, everybody gets infinite ammo for a few seconds. If you roll a 5, one member of your team at random gets their ult. If you roll a 6, everyone on your team gets a 10% ult charge. As for her team ups, I think most of the people she would match with aren't added to the cast just yet, so I'll keep this section simple. However, I think having a team up with Wolverine called Lucky Penny would be pretty funny, where his passive has a chance to give him double the bonus health rather than the standard. This is a work in progress, as I'm very aware this all sounds very OP, but the great part is that she's such a wild card. Picking her could either throw the entire game or turn a complete stomp fest around. If it does feel too broken, it's also pretty easy to tweak just by lowering the chances on her moves. Anyway, as much as I think it's a killer idea, I doubt we'll see her, and if we do, it won't be for a very long time, so this is mostly just wishful thinking, but let me know what you think. Let's move on to somebody a lot more likely. Juggernaut. In my last video, people were very vocal about who they want, and by far the most popular choice was Juggernaut. I'm surprised because I didn't know he was that popular, but fear not brothers, I share your desire to ram squishies into fucking oblivion like the good old days. If you have to ask me what role he's going into, you probably still play Overwatch. My main worry with Juggernaut is I imagine his moveset would be quite similar to the Thing, but I have some ideas on how to differentiate him, so let me know what you all think. For his regular attacks, I think just regular swings work fine. For his passive, somebody in one of my last videos mentioned him having a momentum gauge, which gives him more speed the longer he stays moving in one direction. He can consume that momentum for bonus health or armor, or use it to just ram into people, of course. For his first cooldown, I think having an instant startup that brings him to top speed straight away, allowing him to either charge into someone immediately, or just consume the momentum for health. This allows him the flexibility of being offensive or defensive. For his second cooldown, generating a defensive barrier around himself, which can also generate momentum, the more damage he takes sounds lore accurate and useful. Finally, the ultimate. Juggernaut's been shown to have some level of size manipulation, so him just straight up doubling in mass, charging forward and pinning each character he hits would be so satisfying. You can either slam them through destructible terrain, which does damage and keeps going, or you can carry them off the map, or, of course, just slam them into something non-destructible for 150 health per character you've pinned. Team-ups are a tad trickier, but I think it makes sense to give him and the Thing a thing that upgrades both their charges, either being faster or granting them more bonus health. Maybe something similar with the Hulk, since they both have defensive bubble-like shields. Anyway, that's all for Juggernaut. Along with him, the second most requested character seemed to be Quicksilver. And I can't blame you. Quicksilver is a duelist that would be the absolute terror of the backline. I think just for everybody's sanity, giving him not too much vertical mobility, so at least he has to stay relatively close to the ground, will help balance him. But the arrival of Quicksilver should change the meta, making dive comps a lot more viable and helping deal with the triple support setup right now. For his passive, I think he should have a speed meter similar to Star-Lord's jet boots, but it allows him to move incredibly quickly. It regenerates over time. For his regular attack, just very fast punches that do little damage, but if you use it while sprinting, it does a little bit more. For his first cooldown, I think having a dash ability which generates a sonic boom that knocks over enemies and does fairly decent damage, this allows him to dive the backline a lot safer, flooring them before closing in on a high priority target. For his second cooldown, I like the idea of a save, like Lifeweaver's pull ability from Overwatch, but instead of pulling, he just runs up to you and grabs you and then gets the fuck out. Maybe one last cooldown, as I feel like I haven't given him enough damage yet, so a sort of command grab where you run around the enemy just beating the fuck out of him in a small tornado. Finally, the ultimate. I like a CC ability with low damage, which is more of a combo ultimate. Maybe he runs around in a ring really fast, hitting anybody who tries to leave it for decent damage, meaning they either need to use cooldowns to escape, or risk getting hit with another ult from Storm, Venom, Iron Man, etc. I must admit, I don't know a whole lot about Quicksilver as a character, so let me know if there's any characters he could team up with that make sense lore-wise. So far, all I've really got is Scarlet Witch, who could empower his sprint with a small magic hitbox that surrounds him, or makes him damage resistant, and Magneto, who could pair his ultimate with Quicksilver's, picking up metal collected in his tornado. Okay, so far we've had one duelist, one vanguard, and one strategist. Let's try and keep that pattern going with Ultron. Look, I know I said Juggernaut and Quicksilver are the most requested ones that I saw, but Ultron was a very, very close third. Those three have the podium without a doubt. I think one reason a lot of people tend to shy away from the support roles in shooters is because the characters just don't tend to be as cool. Of course there are exceptions, but the average gamer is probably more drawn to this guy than this guy. Ultron is a very good fix for that, because he's got the fucking sauce. He should be a much bulkier support, almost half of a tank, which tracks with his adamantium body. I think as a passive, having self-repair works quite well, giving him CC and the health pool to outlast enemy flankers and give your team time to turn around and help. Who am I kidding? They're never gonna fucking do that, but that's my main goal anyway. I'm undecided, but also toying with the idea of giving him flight, but very slow flight, kinda like Storm. For his primary fire, just regular plasma blasters like Iron Man but less damage, and for his secondary fire, same thing but with healing. The first cooldown is going to be an escape option. I don't want to make him too similar to Loki's clone ability, but I do definitely want to bring in his whole shared hive mind persona. So here's a crazy idea. Similar to Rocket's revive pod, Ultron can leave himself spare bodies, up to 2, around the map that he can switch consciousness to. They each have individual health pools, but if you die while in the body, you go back to spawn as normal, and the spare bodies can be destroyed. The second cooldown is the CC that I mentioned, where other partially built robots fly in and lock down the enemy, stopping their movement for a few seconds like a mini Groot ult. Finally, for the ultimate, I'm leaning towards something more offensive. like calling in his robot bodies to him, absorbing them into a tankier version of himself, who's no longer capable of healing, but does big damage, like a mixture of Hulk's ultimate and the Punisher's ultimate. As he does this, he drops the voice line,
"I had strings, but now I'm free."
It would be an absolute crime not to give him a team up with Tony. The only problem is, I don't really know what it should be. Maybe call it no strings and increase Iron Man's flight speed or fuel gauge, or have Tony's Unibeam able to heal allies as well as harm enemies. I want ideas here, let me know in the comments. Now for another Vanguard. I have to give it to my boy, Sandman. I've always had a soft spot for Sandman as being probably my favorite B-tier Spidey villain. And speaking of Spidey, Sandman would be an excellent anti-dive pick since he is an absolute crowd control machine. For his passive, I think he should have more resistance from long range attacks, so weapons that have drop off are less effective on him. This makes sense because projectiles that slow down wouldn't be able to pierce through all of his sand, and it means people will have to get more up close and personal to him, which is where he'd do his best work as well. Either that, or he can just leave a trail of sand where he walks, which slows people that walk over it. That is probably more useful, but I prefer the first idea, it just sounds cooler to me. His primary should be a combo with various sand-made weapons like his trusty mace, a big fist, whatever. It should do a hefty amount of damage, but be relatively slow. I'm also thinking of giving him a secondary fire, which would be low damage sand pellets that slow enemies. The first cooldown, I couldn't resist, pocket sand. No, literally. Disorientating the enemy with the sand to the face, which slows them significantly and prevents them from attacking or healing for a short time. Second cooldown makes him intangible for a moment, turning him into a small sand dune that can't attack, but makes him slightly faster, and gives him a third ability which can turn him into quicksand, trapping an enemy in place for a moment and leaving a lingering slow effect. Enemies can shoot you to let their teammate out of your grasp, which negates the slow effect. For his ultimate, I think giving him a much more powerful version of his second cooldown is a dope idea. He covers a wide area in quicksand, he can't leave that area for the duration, but enemies are slowed while in it and he gains a speed buff and auto heal. Unlike his cooldown, he can also attack while he's in this state. As for team ups, he's teamed up with Spider-Man in the comics, so I like the idea of Spider-Man adding to Sandy Boy's CC, mixing his webbing with the sand to root enemies for longer, or add a longer slow effect. Small side note, I think the idea of Sandman being absolutely terrified of Jeff and his water powers would also make some really funny voice lines. Anyway, back to the DPS. I'm going to go slightly more obscure on this one, so stick with me. I think he's a necessary pick to put certain flying characters in their place. Whiplash. Think about it. He's primarily an Iron Man villain. Making him an anti-flying character who can bring enemies down fits perfectly. A duelist with both CC and heavy damage options. I'm taking heavy inspiration from Silas from League. No, I don't play League, I promise. It was just that one summer, please don't unsubscribe. Anyway, the passive, I'm not too sure. I think having each attack slightly pull enemies in. Not a ton, but enough that you can't just walk out of it if he keeps making his shots. So you either need to use an ability to escape, or make him miss somehow. This gives him some synergy with characters like Groot, Wolverine and Winter Soldier. His primary is obviously just a whip, long range but still melee, with a generous hitbox. I'm open to giving him the Mr. Fantastic Dragon hitboxes too, but I'm not really sure, I prefer to leave that as Mr. Fantastic original. To make it slightly less OP, I think the primary shouldn't do too much damage, but giving him a harder to hit secondary is a cool idea, where he slams his chains together and it does more damage the closer the enemy is to the end of the hitbox, like a tipper from Smash. For his first cooldown, just a straight up Roadhog drag with a high cooldown. However, it has momentum, so if you aim it right, you can also throw people past you and into your team. For the second cooldown, giving him an electrical surge for a short time, making his whips crackle, widening the hitbox and bouncing the current between enemies like Moon Knight's random bullshit. This makes him more effective against ground enemies, but maybe we stick with the theme of anti-flying and just make the electrical current stun enemies for just a second, like Scarlet Witch's AoE. Now, his ultimate. I think grabbing one character in his whips and spinning them around, causing electrical currents through enemies, and eventually throwing that one enemy really far is a good way to deal some good all-around damage and possibly get an easy pick by throwing them off the map or into your team. I really don't want to give him a Storm team up as she's OP enough already, but it does make sense considering the electricity. Thor could do the same thing, I suppose. Whiplash is so niche of a character that he rarely has interacted with anybody outside of Iron Man's comics, so it's hard to give him any team ups that make sense, but let me know if you have any ideas. Alright, we're reaching the end. I've got one last rotation of each role, and then we're done for this video. Next up, for our last strategist, I'm going with another pick none of you saw coming. Mysterio. That's right, bitch. Fishbowl Man. The idea of illusions is versatile and can lead to a lot of fun, and more importantly, a lot of trolling. I don't know how it would really change the meta, but fucking give me a break, man. I'm just a dude, just let me suggest some dumb shit. I think his passive should be that if he goes long enough without taking damage, he disguises himself as another team member, including their health. This is primarily to mess up enemy callouts, as if somebody shouts, "Rocket's 1 HP" or "Scarlet Witch, no Mystic," and everybody sees you running around, they may try and attack you instead, giving your teammates time to get their cooldowns back or regain health. The primary is just a regular spell that heals, and secondary fire simple magic missiles or whatever. Nothing fancy, like a weaker version of Stranger's attacks. I want his abilities to focus around his passive though. His first should give him really good escape option, allowing him to activate it. Maybe literally a smoke bomb that turns him invisible and sends him and the enemy flying away from each other, like Punisher's smoke grenade, but a bit better. For his next cooldown, I think this would just be really funny, but giving him the ability to mimic an ultimate voice line and psych out the enemy team is great. Hearing Legendary from across the map, then popping your Invisible Woman ult only for Mysterio to be sitting there with just a shit-eating grin on his face as you realize you just completely wasted it. Lastly, for his ultimate, I'm stuck between two ideas which are almost complete opposites. Mysterio is most known for being a con artist and illusionist who usually doesn't even have actual powers. So giving him a low cost, low impact ultimate, like making everybody on the enemy just see nothing but Mysterios with infinite health so they have no idea who to focus, seems on brand. But there are rare occasions where he's managed to get real bona fide sorcery. Since his kit is so goofy and troll heavy, I kinda think giving him an actually scary ultimate which can create a bunch of real stage hazards around him while he goes mad with power, like a moving version of Moon Knight's ult, feels like a really cool parallel. Anyway, team ups here are easy. Give him a combo with Strange and Scarlet Witch. Like maybe when Strange uses his portal, Mysterio spawns a second one but it's fake so the enemies don't know which one you're coming from. Scarlet Witch can give Mysterio more magic energy, increasing the range of his ult. Like I said, Mysterio's kit is mostly just for content, but I think these are some genuinely good ideas that could actually be viable if played in, some of the higher ranks where communication is a lot more important. As always, let me know what you think. Up next on the Vanguard front, I have two ideas I'm toying with. I'll save one for the next video because I've got a long list, so if you want me to keep going, like and subscribe. As for right now though, I think what the meta needs is Silver Samurai. And yes, he is going to be a Wolverine counter. Putting aside the cosmetic potential of having a fucking samurai on the roster, I think having a brawler style tank with a real blade would just be a lot of fun. His main thing is being able to cut through anything. So I think his passive, being able to cut through and hit multiple enemies with wide slices, allows for a lot of combos with other ultimates as well. The first cooldown has to be the Aijutsu slash. I may not have pronounced that correctly, but you know what I'm talking about. The unsheath slash thing. But he charges it up like magic, but instead of it being a projectile, He dashes forward and does a quick, high damage slice that leaves him vulnerable for a moment afterwards. The second cooldown though, this is the real cornerstone of his kit. For a few seconds, he parries all attacks. If they're melee, it automatically does 50% of the damage back to the opponent. If they're ranged attacks, you need to aim them back at the opponent, but they do full damage if they hit. His movement should be slower during this mode. I'm considering making alts immune to this ability because we don't want to make him too broken, but again, open to feedback on this. He's primarily always been a Wolverine rival, so making him a tank specifically designed to scare off other close range brawlers feels very fitting. Not just for Wolverine, but characters like The Thing, Magic, Black Panther, Hulk, and Thor are all really good right now. So having this Japanese giant in the front line, but with a dash that can bring him to the back line at a moment's notice, is a good idea. As for his ultimate, I'm a bit lost here. I want to make it different from his other abilities, so I don't just want to give him a random powerful slash. However, the only other idea coming to mind is having him be buffed for a short amount of time, being faster, doing more damage, and being invincible. The downside is that he commits seppuku afterwards, and something tells me Marvel Rivals isn't down with being that racist, so please suggest something else in the comments. I really want to give him a team up with Psylocke, where she gives him the ability to deflect melee attacks for slightly more damage, and maybe she gets an upgraded melee or something. The best part about Silver Samurai, and this is kind of biased, but he will actually help Wolverine mains as well, because people are less likely to ban Wolverine if they have a Samurai on the team, and he's not a super hard counter. As long as you bait out his parry ability, you can still do your thing as Wolverine, but I do feel the pain as a Wolverine main of literally never getting to play who you want, so like I said, I'm biased. Finally, our last DPS of the day, kinda, Phoenix. Oh yeah baby, I can see the Marvel vs. Capcom players sweating already, and for good reason. She is going to be broken, but she will have a big weakness. Here's the thing, when I say Phoenix, I don't really mean Jean Grey. Phoenix is her own character, almost purely DPS, but her passive is upon death, she changes into Jean Grey, who's almost purely a healer. If she dies again, she goes back to spawn as normal. Then, when Jean Grey next dies, she turns into Phoenix. And then Phoenix dies, goes back to spawn, etc. The only thing that ignores this rule is falling off the map. So in theory, you have no control over what character you are. If your team needs a DPS and you're stuck as Jean Grey, tough shit. Either force the enemy team to kill you, or find value as a support. If your team needs more healing but you're stuck as Phoenix, same deal. Mobility wise, both characters are moderately fast flyers. Ability wise, let's start with Phoenix. Primary is just standard fire blasts. They should be harder to hit with a small hitbox, but do very high damage. After all, Phoenix can erase all life. Her secondary ability should be a tiny bit of healing, but not enough to be all too useful. Her cooldown should be a play on her gravity manipulation, creating a mini black hole that pulls enemies towards it, damaging them the closer they are to the center. Second cooldown can lift a character up and hold them for a few seconds. They are invulnerable while being held, but she can walk a small distance and slam them into the ground, repositioning them wherever she likes. For the ultimate, it needs to be a high damage firebird that she shoots out, which passes through multiple enemies, causing damage over time, and an explosion when it reaches the end of its distance. On Jean Grey's side, similar moveset but a lot more defensive. Her primary is just standard healing, of course, with a smaller, damaging psionic wave attack as her secondary. The first ability should be a big heal to one character, or herself, which can also give bonus health which does not degrade over time, but can only be on one character at a time. This can stack with other characters' bonus health moves. So yes, if you give this to a Venom and then he ults, in theory you could be walking around with like fucking 8,000 health. Second ability is the same as Phoenix, but instead of slamming them down, she has to throw them and can't hold them as long. So it's less about repositioning and more about just making yourself safe. Now, Are you ready for some bullshit? Her ultimate would tap into the Phoenix Force, but instead of losing control, it's one of the rare occasions Jean Grey puts a cap on it. She can use this to bring back one character on her team of her choice. I feel like I'm giving Wolverine too many team-ups, but how can I not for Jean Grey? If she's in her Phoenix form, maybe she heats up his claws so he loses rage at a slower rate, but if she's in her Jean Grey form, she reduces the cooldown on his healing factor slightly. Whew, that was a lot. In conclusion, you guys really liked the last video, and I enjoyed making it a lot more than I thought as well. In case you haven't figured it out, I really like comics, and I really like Marvel Rivals, and I really like the potential that it has because of its source material. I tried to focus this video more so around picks we're a lot less likely to get, but also whose power sets would change the meta in interesting ways and introduce new team comps that could rival what's currently popular. Let me know if you like the characters I picked and how you would build them, or if you liked how I built them, and if you have better ideas. And if somebody could tell NetEase to just fucking hire me, I'll give you the gummy hearts for my Haribos. Thanks.